In the previous video, I talked about how a poem is a picture, or a series of pictures, and we looked at the opening lines of Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach as an example. Today I'm going to talk about the idea that a poem is a voice, or a series of voices. A voice comes from somewhere. Someone is speaking, and it goes somewhere. Someone hears that voice. So, who is speaking? And who is being spoken to? At the simplest level, the speaker is the poet, and the person being spoken to is the reader. And that's true for a lot of poems. Very often the title will give us a hint. A couple of videos back I talked about Adrian Mitchell's poem, To Whom It May Concern. So the poem is written to whomever may be concerned by it. The title of John Keats' ode, To Autumn, tells us that he's addressing the words to autumn. If not in the title, we may realise that the poet is talking to someone other than us, the readers, because of the content of the poem. The first line of Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, Shall I compare thee to a summer's day, tells us that the poet is speaking to someone who, as the second line tells us, is more lovely and more temperate than a summer's day. In the last video, I talked about Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach, which doesn't give any such hints in the title, and the opening lines appear to be, quite simply, the poet speaking to the reader. But then the poet says, Come to the window, sweet is the night air. This changes the way we look at the poem in several ways. To start with, the picture itself changes. The first few lines contain images of nature. We have no clear sense of where the observer is, apart from the fact that it must be a place from which the sea, the moon, the French coast and the cliffs of England can all be seen. Now, though, we know that the speaker, whom we can assume to be Arnold himself, is indoors, viewing all these things through a window. And we know that he's speaking to another person, or perhaps more than one person, inviting them to come to the window. Arnold doesn't tell us who he's talking to, and he goes on with his description of the scene and the thoughts it gives rise to in his mind. It's only towards the end of the poem that he says, Ah, love, let us be true to one another. And finally, the picture is complete. The poet is talking to someone he loves, saying, Let us be true to one another. This must be the person invited to the window in the first part of the poem. In all the poems I've mentioned so far, by Adrian Mitchell, Keats, Shakespeare and Matthew Arnold, it's the poet who speaks. Let's finish today by looking at a poem in which there are other voices, not just the voice of the poet. The Clod and the Pebble by William Blake. Love seeketh not itself to please, nor for itself hath any care, but for another gives its ease, and builds a heaven in hell's despair. So sang a little clod of clay, trodden with the cattle's feet, but a pebble of the brook warbled out these meters meet. Love seeketh only self to please, to bind another to its delight, joys in another's loss of ease, and builds a hell in heaven's despite. The different voices in this poem are fairly easy to spot. The clues are in the second stanza. So sang a little clod of clay. That makes it clear that the first voice in the poem is the voice of the clod, while a pebble of the brook warbled out these meters meet prepares us for the voice of the pebble in the third stanza. There are several difficult words in that line, warbled out those meters meet. If we approach the poem with lively expectations, we can probably guess that the pebble will be the next to speak. It's mentioned alongside the clod in the title of the poem, so we can easily imagine that the voice of the clod will be balanced by the voice of the pebble. Alternatively, we could turn to a dictionary, which would tell us straight away that warbling is a kind of singing, which would confirm that the following voice is that of the pebble. Meters meet is more difficult, even with the help of a dictionary, because the poet uses both words in an unusual or less usual sense. The main point is that the pebble's going to sing. And it doesn't matter much if we don't understand meters meet. If you're really curious though, well, meters here basically refers to the rhythms of poetry and song, and meet is used in its older sense of suitable or fitting. So Blake is saying that the pebble sang a suitable song. We can see that the clod and the pebble have completely different ideas, opposite ideas, about love, but that's a topic for the next video. Here's a homework task for anyone who wants it. See if you can figure out the voices in Stevie Smith's Not Waving, but Drown. See you next time.